Welcome to Parc Ferm, the Canadian Formula One podcast. We talk race reviews, news from the paddock, and bring you everything from the world of Formula One. And now your hosts, Drew, Walker, Ed, and Tomas.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Parc Ferm, the Canadian Formula One podcast. Back here with the boys after a thrilling Singapore Grand Prix. We got Drew, Edward, Thomas. We got a lot to chat about today. Really exciting race, which for me actually started off as like a horrible race. I had a whole mood swing throughout that entire race, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Boys, a little recap. Drew, you want to start us off? How'd you like the weekend? What'd you think of the race?
I think this is the weekend that we were all waiting for. I think everyone was looking for the fall of the empire, the Red Bull empire, and we got it. Did I know that Ferrari was going to take the top spot? You know what? They've been looking nice. You know, Carlos Sainz has been arguably the best I've ever seen him. This is a whole new and improved Carlos Sainz, and you know, listening to him on the radio, making some absolutely insane calls himself, because we all know Ferrari can't do it. So he's managing the team and managing himself and racing a car at the same time. You know what? It was an absolutely fantastic race. It was nice that it was dry, and it was just a really good change up of pace without Red Bull winning it 1-2. Yeah, that's my take on it. What do you got, Thomas?
Man, I fucking love this race. This is the what I tuned in for, you know. As you said, fall of the empire. Nothing against Red Bull, but it's so nice to have 1, 2, 3 different people on there. Again, Carlos Sainz, god damn, Lando Norris, god damn, Liam Lawson points out qualifies Red Bull too. God damn, son. AlphaTauri's looking slick. So fucking amazing race. I hope there's way more races like that to come and yeah, I fucking loved it. It was so fun, so enjoyable. The ending was amazing too. The 4 cars battling it out. The last lap with George Russell, like, just holy shit. Everything was fucking Thomas on point spec race. I loved it. Ed, what about you?
I don't know what else I can say after that. Like, you pretty much covered everything. Like, me and Walker are in trouble now. We can't even make any comments for the race at this point. In my case though, like, I actually enjoyed quali even more because I saw that Red Bulls did not make it past Q2. I was like, something is really up with their setup, and Max Verstappen said that the car is undrivable, and I'm like, here we go. It's foreshadowing of the fall of the empire, as everyone's been saying. So yeah, like, you covered pretty much everything, Thomas. It was a fantastic race. Loved the last 10 laps of the race. Like, what else can you ask for without Red Bull being in the picture? That for me was just wow. Walker, how about you?
Well, so I love how fired up Thomas is today. We don't get this much exuberance and excitement out of him on a regular basis, so it's nice to see. I'm glad you woke up for this one. I have a slightly different take on this one. So I think great race. I will admit, the first 16, 17 laps, the first half an hour, I was so disillusioned. I was watching this thing, and I was watching them parade around, and no one really racing, and everyone, I understand the strategy behind it with the tires and all that kind of stuff. I get that. But it was like, is this what I tuned in to watch? Like a bunch of fucking Formula One cars parading around, waiting for like the last few laps for someone to actually make a move. I was so disillusioned with it. I was so annoyed. And then we had the safety car, and that obviously changed absolutely everything. And then from that point on, the race really took off, and you start to see the strategy come into play. You start to see Red Bull again just kind of fall apart, and you know, nothing went their way this weekend, right? The strategy didn't go their way, qualifying didn't go their way. It's just they didn't have the car with them. And then from there on, I think it became much more interesting. But From my point, it was just, a huge swing of emotion, because again, it was just, I was just praying that this wasn't the race that we were going to watch for the entire 62 laps. It's just having them, processionally go around the track. It was just, that part was no fun. But I'm glad it came alive. To everyone's point, it was an amazing race, great strategy. George Russell at the end, clipping the wall and just out after a strong, amazing weekend, great race. It was just, it had the highs, it had the lows, it had emotion, it had suspense, and to everyone's point, it was just nice to see someone else up on the podium. Wasn't a Red Bull. As much as we had talked a few weeks ago about, maybe it's nice to kind of see this kind of excellence in sport, and to see Max really dominate and go for all these wins and dominate the entire season, I realized that actually it's more fun to see him lose. And I really enjoyed seeing him, not do well, storm off after qualifying, storm off after the race, and just, that was very, very, very satisfying. So, overall, end of the day, great race. I do want to talk about Red Bull a little bit more. Obviously, they had a rough weekend. There are lots of reasons. Might be track specific, might be some more reasons, might be a particular technical directive that came into play. What do we attribute to their lack of pace for Singapore? Ed?
Ride height has been the consistent topic out of all of the F1 pundits that I've read and watched and listened to. Like, technically, the only reason why they had to raise the ride height was because Singapore's track is a little bit bumpy. The curbs are really high compared to the other tracks that they had in the past few races. And that same theme is going to follow into Japan as well. And because of the raising of that ride height, like, they've lost significant amount of ground effects and downforce, which is what normally takes them into great heights of speed and pace compared to the rest of the field. And I also want to tone back to what we were talking about a few weeks ago, with Sergio Perez complaining about a car that's being built around Max Verstappen. Didn't seem like it this time. So my hat's off to you on your comment on that one, Walker, that yes, it's not just towards, like, the main driver, but if the car is not responsive and not built for that certain race, and as we all know, Singapore is a high downforce requirement race. That's what happened. Like, it just did not work for them at all. How about you, Drew? What do you think about it?
You know what, Red Bull's been so strong all year. Like, undoubtedly the far and away the best car on the track. And Singapore is a very unique circuit. They have, 3 different surface compounds, different types of tarmac and asphalt. And I think that came into play too, because, the Red Bulls are very racy. And when you're good at all the other circuits, when you have this one outlier, this one anomaly that comes into play, like, Singapore is like the race that everyone thought Red Bull was going to be, struggling at. And it came true. And to be honest, perfectly honest, I think that Red Bull is going to be back in full form at the next track at Suzuka. And I think that there's an opportunity for Red Bull to learn a lot. But, historically, it's the same thing that happened, right? When Mercedes was a super dominant car and then they came to Singapore, they just shit the bed, right? So this isn't a unique scenario. It's exactly what everyone thought was going to happen as far as predictability is concerned. And Red Bull struggled through and through. And you know what? Popular or unpopular opinion, Max actually drove a great race. He didn't make any errors. He was true to form as Max does, but he just didn't have the car this time. So I guess it kind of shows too that, like, other teams like Mercedes, that, like, they might not have the best car, but it just proves that, like, how good and how important consistency is to maintaining, any sort of chance in the Drivers' Championship. And with a little love from George Russell, kissing that wall, that Lewis Hamilton was able to jump on the podium and snatch some seriously important points away from Checo Perez in the Drivers' Championship. So it would have nice to see George Russell up there as well. But you know what? To be honest, let's get back to the Red Bull thing. It's just so fucking satisfying to watch Red Bull struggle. Not gonna lie, everyone, when you're at the top, there's only one place to go, and everyone kind of wants to cheer for you to lose. It's like when you see the undefeated team, the the New England Patriots and stuff. They're gonna win. You're just waiting for them to lose, and it's like, are they gonna lose against like the Cleveland Browns, or are they gonna lose against like another like decent team? So like, we just watched it happen, and you know what? It was quite a nice thing of Christian Horner to do, to go over to Carlos Sainz and say, you know what, if anyone had to win and break Max and Red Bull's streak, that I'm glad it was you. I thought that was super classy of him. And I agree with Christian too. I think Carlos, he was the perfect driver to do this, because anyone else would have just taken that and ran with it. And I think he was super classy about it. What do you got, Thomas?
I agree with Ed and what you said, Drew, as well. Suspension definitely came into play. The different tarmac compounds came into play. One thing I will mention to you, Drew, I hope you're wrong on this. I hope Red Bull does struggle in Suzuka. I hope we see another interesting race. And you know what? To your point again, Drew, if there was another 5 or 7 laps, yeah, I think Max Verstappen would have caught up, and he probably would have won the race again. I think he just ran out of time and laps. So, again, but Red Bull wasn't the only car, or wasn't the only team that I noticed struggling. Fernando Alonso struggled too, and he was hanging on for I think at 9th or 8th, and then he made a small mistake, and he that's it. He finished last. He did horribly, and he seemed like he was really struggling from the early days. This car is amazing to drive and drives beautifully, to this is undrivable, so clearly something happened there too. But yeah, that's as much as I have to add. What about you, Walker?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think we touched on all the points and why we think Red Bull would have struggled. There was a lot of talk about this technical directive that was really focusing on, flexible wings and flexible surfaces. But according to, everybody's statements, it wouldn't really affect this track. I think if, they continue to struggle in tracks like Suzuka, that's a little bit faster. I think maybe then there might be something there. But, I just want to go back to something, Drew, you mentioned about how I think there was just a collective cathartic release from all F1 fans across the globe to see someone else win. And I think regardless of who that was, I mean, I think Sainz, as we mentioned earlier, has really come up strong the last few races, and he was definitely deserving of that race. But I think it will be interesting to see how Red Bull can bounce back, and we'll find out if they just go back to form and continue to dominate on a track that's more suited for their car, or if this is really an ongoing trend in the development of their car, or how other cars and teams have developed to this point. Lots of highlights in this race. Your top highlight, really quickly, Drew.
Top highlight. Liam Lawson out qualifying both Red Bulls in his third race. Hats off to you. Kudos, buddy. And I know it was Red Bull's worst race, but it was Liam Lawson in his best, and good for you, dude. Hats off.
Ed?
Highlight. Okay, Ed, me, whatever. I'm gonna go. Sorry, Ed. Highlights for me is gonna be kind of 2. One of them is Red Bull not winning. That was a huge highlight for me. The other one was George Russell tapping the wall at the last lap. I mean, I feel bad for him, but at the same time, it's like, you know what, bro? You lost it. You caved under the pressure, and it's all your fault. So those are more interesting highlights from my perspective. Ed?
Don't shit on George Russell. It wasn't his fault that his PlayStation controller disconnected at the last second. He had to hit the wall. Don't feel. You gotta give him a chance, But on getting back onto topic, favorite highlight was McLaren back in the day, Sainz and Lando Norris doing teamwork in order to keep their race alive and keep their positions alive. Like they held back the Mercs. Like the Mercs had fresh tires, they had pace. Both Sainz and Lando knew that if they got through, Sainz would be in trouble and might not win the race. Lando would have lost his podium, and that was it. So yeah, like the it was brilliant strategy. Got to George. George crashed. Luckily enough, Lewis was able to keep his composure. But yeah, like I love that action. Like it just boils down to strategy and like self-preservation of what they wanted to take for that race, which is a podium and a win. So yeah, fantastic highlight for me. That was the best. I don't know, but like for another 5 laps, probably like maybe Mercedes would have gotten the win, and possibly Max Verstappen could have been either in the podium as well. Who knows? Like another 5 laps would have been very interesting. How about you, Walker?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about George Russell a little bit. I think I think him clipping the wall was probably the highlight, and not because of anything against George Russell. I think he's, a great upcoming driver, but I just think in terms of like that moment, that time in the race, the tension, the emotion, the suspense, and then for that to happen on the last lap, I think it just, from a viewer standpoint, from a fan standpoint, it's just like the crescendo of like an amazing composition, an amazing orchestration that has happened that entire race. So I think from a straight up timing perspective and emotional perspective, I think that was an amazing highlight. I do want to know what you guys think about the Mercedes. They came obviously on strong after that tire change. It seemed like Lewis had a little bit more pace over the last few laps. Roles being reversed, do you think Lewis could have taken Norris and perhaps Sainz? Do you think there was an experience factor there that was missing from Russell? You know, a pressure that was that maybe got to him that Lewis maybe could have withheld a little bit longer, because he definitely looked like he had some more pace than George near the end.
I think that there was. I don't know if Mercedes played it right. I think they should have split the strategy. And then pitting George was probably a dumb play because I think Lewis would have had a better shot at it. George was already higher in the points, so just let him ride that out and keep what he was doing. But I think, if they did end up pitting and George was behind Hamilton, I think Hamilton definitely is in a more aggressive mindset. I think, just like Valtteri Bottas, like I think George Russell kind of plays it safe, which is great and a very Mercedes thing to do. But I think Lewis Hamilton has that little bit more like bite in him. And I think that would have definitely come into play. And I think there was just an opportunity for Lando to get a little bit nervous with Hamilton behind them versus somebody like George, where they're like, buddies and stuff like that. Quick answer. I think Hamilton would have done a much better job at putting pressure on Lando to see what would have happened, and maybe he would have kissed the wall a little harder than he did, because he did kiss the wall, but he just got away with it. And unfortunately, Georgie Porgy just kissed a little too long, put a little tongue in it, and it came back and bit him in the ass. You know what I mean?
No, I have to agree. I think if George or if Lewis was in front of George, experience would have played a role. He would have been, as Drew said, he would have been way more aggressive, and he would have had, I think, a higher chance of catching up to Lando and maybe even giving Sainz a fight. There's not too much to add on my side. Yeah, I think that would have made a huge difference if he was ahead of George. Ed?
I don't know. I think it would have made a difference. I did see that Lewis had pace, but the entire race, including qualifying, I think it was like 20 or 15 laps left. George was like, I want to go for the win. And like he pulled and pulled and pulled and made sure that he kept up pace and wanted to take it to both Lando and Carlos Sainz. And I don't think it would have made a difference at all. I mean, the pressure was there from Lewis, and I think had the pressure not been that great, because I think it was both sides of the pressure for him wanting to win and from thinking that Lewis had more pace. But at the end of the day, like I think that with Lewis not even wanting any championship wins or just like a win in general, no change at all. Like I would have expected George to win, and then Lewis will come in second for a 1-2 finish. Walker?
I have absolutely no idea. I just asked the questions. I was just curious what you guys thought. I do love George's. I think he's a very aggressive driver. I think he really wants to win. I think he's very competitive. And I love seeing that side of him. I think, he it was a mistake of millimeters, right? Of centimeters. So I think at that point, who's to say what would happen otherwise? Looked like Lewis had a little bit more pace near the end. Maybe he was better at managing his tires, warming them up, just kind of that whole process of really getting them in the zone and be able to carry them out, because it seemed like George was losing the tires a bit near the end. But overall, great day. And I think, we would collectively agree that that was probably the battle of the day. Who is your driver of the day? Is this going to be unanimous? I'm not sure. Drew?
Carlos Sainz.
Yeah. You got to go with
I don't know if
Carlos.
that's going to be the unanimous. My second best would have been Liam Lawson, but like that was just I'm so happy for two things. I'm so happy for Carlos because he's just coming into his own at this point in his career, which seems wild. It seems like a lot of these older drivers are like stepping up to the plate. Alonso, Hamilton, like these guys are coming back and still running a fucking muck, which is awesome. And like, not that I'm saying Carlos is that old, but I'm saying that like he's not a spring chicken anymore in the F1 world. And to see him like own it, even though it's like, the unspoken truth that like, Chuckles the Buckles is like the number one driver on that team. And he is just absolutely ignoring that and showing up to bat every single fucking day. And like one lap Chuckles is great, but like you don't get any points on a Saturday, unfortunately. Right. So it's just so nice to see Carlos doing well and just with that confidence in him. And like, we all know how Ferrari doesn't manage a team, and to have the ability to manage, just to be in that headspace and be like 3 steps ahead of everybody else. It was super nice to see. Yeah, probably unanimous, but yeah, I'm going to go with Carlos. What do you got, Ed?
George Russell. Yep. Like,
Not unanimous.
Not unanimous at all. Like, I don't know. Like, there was a really long train behind Carlos Sainz when he was running the race at P1. I felt like normally when you have Red Bull or Mercedes in the past few years, when they're P1, they're stretching it all the way. They're like gone into the sunset. But with Carlos, he held the pace for the entire pack, for the entire race. So I don't know. For me, I feel like that's holding back. Whereas George was just like pushing and pushing and pushing to try to catch up. So for me, like he wanted it, he forced it, but Carlos played it smart. But my vote's still for George. Thomas?
Carlos Sainz, just because fucking amazing job right there. But again, as Drew, Liam Lawson, holy shit, rookie, where did that come from? Yeah, Drew Walker.
So I'm going to say Carlos, but I have a follow-up question for Ed. So, you took that example of, Max or Mercedes just like driving off into the distance. Is it more impressive to win the way Carlos won than the way Max wins? Knowing that you don't have the car to pull away, that you don't have the car to kind of gap the rest of the field. So instead you're really relying on A, strategy.
He was working for it the whole time, man.
B, he's also, having to make sure that he's defending the entire time. Max, he's 30 seconds ahead. He's fucking like looking at the screens. He's fucking telling jokes. He's doing whatever. Whereas, Carlos, like he had to hustle for that win. There was no breaks, no time off. So is it more impressive to win with a less dominant car than someone like Max, who's just, as I mentioned, off into the sunset? What do you think?
I don't know. For me, like if you're winning a race and all what do you call this? All of the necessary factors have to be included. So if we're talking about this race specifically versus how Max wins, then yes, um, definitely a lot more impressive. A subpar car, uh, and trying to hold the field, better strategy. That's at this certain situation. But if you were to compare it to Max Verstappen in the entire, I would say the entire year, and he has the car, he has the pace, but of course, like it's hard to compare. It's apples to oranges at that point. But yes, coming from a driver's standpoint, no car whatsoever, then yeah, no brakes, 100%. Like it's better for this race. But for me, if I'm racing, I want to be clear in a way and be able to relax.
Yeah, if you're racing, but if you're watching a race, you want what happened last weekend, right? I understand as a driver, you know, you don't want that pressure, but I think as a viewer, as a fan, I mean that was probably one of the best races we've seen. Post lap 17, that was probably one of the best races we've seen all season. And I think part of that strategy and the fact that you had to fight for every lap was a big part of that. I want to move to Ferrari really quickly. Obviously, there's been a bit of a swing in the power over there in terms of who is dominating right now. What do you think is happening in Ferrari? Where do you see that dynamic right now? Are they, again, Leclerc is coming in as the incumbent number one. Do you think he's still viewed that way?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I still think Chuckles, in his mind, he still thinks he's number one. But what I'm really enjoying is having Carlos think that he's number one now and showing up to bat and being like, you know what? I'm not taking the status quo. I'm not just going to roll over. I'm not just going to let this guy be number one. I'm going to prove through my driving and my own personal team management that I can do this and I deserve a shot. If there is, a choice of upgrades on a car, I want that shot. And again, like I said about Mercedes, like consistency is going to be the key. So like he can't just have a couple good races in a season. He has to keep doing this and he has to keep outperforming Chuckles. And I think that Leclerc has an ability to fight this and come back, because what we're seeing is that Ferrari has the pace if Red Bull's out of the picture. So if Red Bull comes back and starts dominating again, then obviously we're going to be talking about second or third place even. But like Charles really needs to show up to bat, not just on Saturdays, which is historically what he's been doing this year, is just showing up to bat. But I think, a little bit more consistency. I think that, Frevis are being able to jump into head office there, be the principal. And I think they're getting a little bit of gelling, a little synergy going on. I think having a little bit of consistency in the management has kind of, been a better thing. Who knows? Their strategist is whatever. I haven't seen anything amazing out of them yet. So let's wait till that plays out. But as far as Ferrari is concerned, like, let me rephrase that. I think, we just saw what F1 2023 would look like without Red Bull. And it was awesome. And all those cars are much closer, right? You take out the outlier of Red Bull and like Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren are like three going for the top. And like that would just be absolutely epic. But what we got to see is how close they actually are, because we're just so normally just so concerned that like Red Bull's 20 minutes away. And that, we don't even get to see this because like, we know what's happening, because that's why we do the first, second, third, fourth. We don't even just do that anymore in our predictions, because Max just always wins. And we actually forgot how close the rest of the pack actually is. And I thought this was point and proof of that. But what do you got, Thomas?
I agree. I think Leclerc thought that the whole team and whole Ferrari is behind him. He's number one. And Carlos is having none of that. He's like, fuck you guys. Like, I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to show you how good I am. And I think this race or after this race is going to cause some friction between the drivers. Good friction, mind you, because now Charles is going to be like, shit. This guy is actually going to go for it, and he has a lot to prove it. He just showed us what he can do and he can achieve, And I think Ferrari as a team, they're going to look at that too, and they're going to be like, maybe we had it wrong. Maybe we should, start betting on Carlos Sainz and seeing what he can do, how he can perform. Maybe we should put some more resources towards him instead of Leclerc. Yeah, I think it's going to cause some friction between the drivers, some good friction. Hopefully, we're going to see more of them racing each other and going for the win. And hopefully, it's going to continue that way overall with less Red Bull involved, I guess, in the race. What I'm trying to say. Hopefully, there's going to be more of a mix within the GP, and we're going to see more different teams and cars on the podium beside them. So that's what I think. Ed?
I don't know. For me, I think that Sainz, after those two races, Monza and Singapore, he's number one. Like I mentioned this like a few weeks ago, that Sainz only needs to know that he's in a good car for his talent, and he can squeeze a lot out of it, and lo and behold, he can. And the strategy and being able to dictate the pace of the race is there. You guys saw it. So I think with the way how Leclerc took the reins when Sebastian Vettel was still in Ferrari, I think now it's a turn of the tide where Sainz is now going to take the reins from Leclerc, because he's there in qualifying, but you don't win points in qualifying.
So I think the concept of the 1 and 2 driver is really interesting, and I was thinking about this the other day, trying to really think to myself whether Carlos Sainz is quote unquote a number one driver, right? And a lot of that comes down to the hype that they come in with it, their development, their career trajectory, and I think it's hard for someone like Carlos Sainz to position himself as a number one driver in a top tier team. And that's just my perspective and my perception, I guess. And I don't really know why. And it shouldn't necessarily be that way. I kind of take it as, Bottas is right now is a number one driver on his team, but he's also on one of the worst teams on the grid, right? So will Sainz ever be perceived as a number one driver for one of the top 4 teams, call it Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, and Ferrari? Or is he always going to languish as number 2?
I think so. Like, you know what? Now that you phrase it that way, dude, like the more I think about it, he's a great driver, and I think he does deserve to be in a top 4 team. And I think he's showing that to us until someone better comes along. But that's F1. Right? Like everyone's as good as they are until someone better comes along and proves themselves. Like that's how all these guys got to the grid. And I think that Carlos Sainz, I don't know. I guess I agree with you on some levels, because you have to come in with a certain excitement about you, coming up through the ranks, or you have some sort of pedigree behind you when you jump in front of or when you jump into an F1 car. And I think Leclerc had that a lot more than Carlos did. But then you have someone like Fernando Alonso, who has come in, he made waves, left, came back, was a fuck around because he was in fuck around teams, and now he's shown up to bat again. Is there an opportunity for Carlos Sainz to jump over to an Audi Sauber team, or Andretti Cadillac or something like that if they end up making it onto the grid and being a number one driver? Yeah, I think so. Or maybe you have a unique scenario like Aston Martin where Papa Stroll's got a number one driver and then a very fucking clear number 2, unfortunately. You know what I mean? So there's always an opportunity, I think. And if there ends up being 1 or 2 more teams on the grid, do I think Carlos could go over and be a number 1 vet? Yeah, 100%. But it won't be on a top 4 team though. Bang on. Yeah. You nailed that.
I almost, it's almost like how you market yourself, right? And the way you market yourself early, or you get marketed, is almost how you're pigeonholed a little bit. And I'd love to see that change maybe a little bit, but I will look at Lewis, for example. He had a rough year last year, right? But he was always considered the number 1 driver. If Max next year shits the bed, he's still going to be the number 1 driver, no matter who's in that second seat, right? So I think performance is one thing, but also just the the incumbent nature with which you kind of enter a team, I think also plays a big role. So, I'd love to see Sainz get his shot, but maybe that's just not his path. Maybe he's more of like a Sergio Perez path, where he's just talented, scrappy, wins a bunch of fights, but will he ever be that true number one? I don't know. Time will tell. Let's move on to Japan, Suzuka. I love this track. I think it's a ton of fun. I think it's dynamic. There's a lot going on there. It's fast. It's something I'm really looking forward to. What are we looking forward to seeing as we go into this next weekend? Ed? Oh, Thomas, he's got his hand up. He's ready.
I'm ready. What am I looking forward? Red Bull not being on the podium. Yeah, that's right. I fucking
knew that was
I
going
want
to say.
Yeah, exactly. I want another interesting race like we just had, and I'm hoping again more variety on the leaders. Hopefully, maybe we're gonna see McLaren first, or who knows, maybe Aston Martin, or even if it's Ferrari again, I'm okay with that too. As long as Red Bull is not in the top 3, let's fucking go. That's what I'm looking forward to. True.
All right. I'm going to be honest with myself here. I think that Singapore was the anomaly. Like, I actually think that Red Bull's going to come back with their big horn swinging, and they're just going to, yeah, dude, don't shake your head, bro. This isn't this.
Keep your mouth shut with that. Don't talk trash like that here. That's not acceptable.
There has been absolutely no reason for us to think otherwise. Every team is entitled to a bad race, and if you are going to have a bad race, Singapore is where it's going to get handed to you. And like I'd mentioned earlier, any other team that's had some domination going on in the past, i.e. Mercedes, every time they came to Singapore, there was a big swing, and it proved itself again. So like ultimately, I'm very much looking forward to a mixed up grid. I think at this point in the season, we're seeing a lot of subplots going on. And I think there's a lot of guys like Carlos Sainz getting some attention, getting some confidence behind him. Checo Perez is getting some confidence back. Max now has something to lose, because if he loses again, then it wasn't just an anomaly. It's him in a bad rut, and his arrogance won't allow that to happen. But then you got guys like George Russell now who have something to prove, because he was so good all race and then ate shit at the end, and he's got to come back with a vengeance just for his ego to come and check. Then you got somebody like Fernando Alonso, who's like absolutely gutted about what happened. To go from the top to the bottom is not something that he wants to do. So he's got to come back and prove something. Then you got, Lancey Pants Stroll, see what he's got coming back, because now he, I think, is fighting for his fucking seat. Even if Daddy Stroll is controlling the team or the money or whatever, at some point he has to answer to somebody and be like, I don't want to waste 1,000 people's time, money, and effort to support a guy who just isn't in the top 20 drivers. Is he a great driver? 100%. But is he like the top 20 in the world? Nah, B. He's got daddy's money. It's the only reason he's got the seat. So I think there's a lot of drivers with something to prove and a lot of places to make up in the drivers championship. And there's a lot of scrappy points going on between like Haas and Alpine and these guys on the mid to low level pack that are scrapping it out for the constructors championship, because those points, 1 point can mean the difference in millions of dollars in championship money. So, the last half of this season is going to be absolutely interesting, and I'm pumped to see it, guys. What do you got, Ed?
I'm going to say that this race will boil down to what Adrian Newey is going to do with that ride height, because they have a few corners that they have to deal with in terms of high downforce, Dunlop, Spoon, and the 130R. If they don't get that right, and even on the snake after turn 1, if they don't get that right, it's Red Bull again being out in qualifying. For me, like, this is another track that they would need some ride height because of the curbs being really, really high. So it really will depend on them setting up the car properly, and if it's great, it's going to work. But if we'll see what happens. Like I'm not gonna bank on them being, they're gonna come back out of this. I'm feeling that they're gonna ditch the Asian leg and be like, yeah, we'll just catch up on the next race after Japan.
You know what? As much as I'd love to be on Team Thomas here and feel like the tide is turning and see someone else up top, I can't help but think that Drew is maybe, a little bit more bang on. And, everyone's allowed to have a bad race, as you mentioned.
You guys are
after
wrong.
15
You're all
straight
wrong.
wins.
Red Bull's going to lose.
Thank you. That's an excellent argument. Thank you very much. As much as I would like to, believe that I got to think they're going to be more competitive than they were, and they're winners, right? They're proven winners, obviously. And I think they are not going to be happy with what happened. Lots on the line. I think the place, we obviously know that the first place in the Constructors' Championship is done, but I think second place, Ferrari, Mercedes, that's going to be a really fun battle to watch going down to the end, the last 7 races. We mentioned Stroll. We'll see if he continues in F1 because, guaranteed, as much as Papa Stroll loves his son, he probably loves money and winning a hell of a lot more. No offense, Lance, but you already know this.
Can we just really quickly just go back to Edward? And did the Asian leg, did that not jump out to me? Like, that sounded like a dish at like a Chinese restaurant. You know when they try to translate it from like Mandarin into English, and it's like, what is this called? It's the Asian leg.
He's the only one that could say that.
Yeah.
He's the only one that could say that. The rest of us would be canceled, but it's okay for him.
Canceled.
I'm not gonna say that I'm allowed to say it.
Yeah,
but I did.
But no, I'm saying you're allowed to. It's like I can make Jew jokes. It's fine. Anyone else here? Well, actually, I don't know. But anyways, Japan's gonna be great. Suzuka, always fun. Do we want to do top 4? Or do we want to do top 3? Are we feeling a little spicy? What do we want to do? Just top 3? Let's just do top 3.
Let's do top 3. Top 3.
Top 4. Why, Thomas? That means you think Max is gonna win.
Well, no,
exactly.
3 plus 1.
Okay, top 3.
I just want to do top 4 because make it more interesting. But if you guys want to do top 3, let's do top 3.
Well, we only do top 4 because we're reserving number 1 for Max.
Okay,
So,
fine. Top 3 it is.
Based on your argument, it should. Yeah, top 3 it is. There you go. Okay, you
You're
go
up first. Yeah.
Okay. Lando 1, 2 Lewis, 3 Russell.
Okay. He's doubled down on Merc this weekend. Okay, I see you. I'm gonna go with Max, Carlos, Checo.
I like. I'm gonna go with Lewis, Lando, Sainz.
Okay. I am going to go. I'd love to see Lando win something. Like, that man is due for a win. So let's go with Lando. Let's go Russell, Redemption, and Max. Let's have him on like the bottom step on the podium.
I think that would hurt him more than being off the podium at all. Like, he wasn't there, but to see him up there, not on the top step, would burn his ass 3 times as bad. Because that means he had a fucking shot and he fucked it up.
That's it. Yeah, that's almost.
Do you one more? I'll do you one more. Max in P4. That would be more painful. Like, he's almost there, almost at the podium, and not even make it.
Interesting. Okay, gonna be a fun race. Do we want to switch gears a little bit here? And we're gonna keep the topic on Red Bull, but we're not actually talking about any of the drivers, because over the break there were a few comments made by the elder statesman of the Red Bull team, Helmut Marko, everyone's favorite racist uncle, specifically about Perez. And it's not the first time he's made offside comments. Do we want to talk about that at all here? Just make any comments?
Yes.
Yes,
We
Drew?
absolutely
Yes, please.
do. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Drew, you want to
Yep.
start us off?
I watched Christian Horner try to answer a question when a reporter asked him about like what are these comments about, and I've never seen Christian Horner be so fucking uncomfortable. It was actually a joy to watch. He was squirming, and the best answer he could come up with was Helmut Marko's not even an employee of Red Bull. Well, that's funny because he's been in your press and pretty much been the voice of a lot of what's going on in Red Bull for the last decade. And it's a surprise to me, and I likely many people, that if he's in the garage that often, to have him as like a third party consultant is very fucking convenient for Red Bull when he starts saying some racist shit. And besides that, having Lewis comment on that saying, I'm paraphrasing, but Lewis said, I'm not surprised about that, blows my mind. This also isn't the first offside comment that Helmut Marko has made about a South American driver before, about Senna, because he doesn't know his geography, which is already blowing my mind, and to just how blatantly obviously racist it is, just to me shows that like he's from a different era. Like you'd mentioned, Walker, great analogy. He's that like old racist uncle or grandparent that you have that like just grew up at a different time when that might have been okay and it's not anymore. Actually, it wasn't okay then, but at least it just happened. But at one point, Red Bull just has to say you're a liability. And I'm going to be honest, if you watch that race, I didn't see Helmut Marko once. And usually there's always a shot or two of him in the garage because he's always talking to people on the grid walk. He's always in the garages talking to people. He didn't show up once on Sky Sports when I was watching it. So just my 2 cents. But the old races got to go to wrap that up.
I agree. Liability, he should not be, speaking for Red Bull. He should not be being seen with Red Bull. Very old school mentality, thoughts, geography. I agree with everything you said, Drew. It's not acceptable. It's not cool. And if Christian Horner did say that, and that he did say that he's not part of Red Bull, then again, what's the point of having him on the team, right? Like, he needs to go. He can't. He shouldn't be there. Simple as that. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Ed?
Well, I think it, the toxic environment that Helmut Marko normally does to his drivers has finally caught up to him. I mean, he's probably one of like the key deciders, or not really deciders, but like he gives a comment to the team, and more often than not, that they would follow it. So like what happened with Gasly, what happened with Kvyat, how Verstappen was able to go into Red Bull from Toro Rosso midway through a racing season. Daniel Ricciardo, so many things, and now Sergio Perez. So I think like just like what Drew said, he's that uncle that was, from another time, and you get canceled now for saying something, that's a generalization of a race, or even just like the capacity of a person due to their race or due to their, ethnicity or background. That's not, that's not accepted anymore. And that should show Red Bull that maybe it's time to move on from from Dr. Helmut Marko.
I just want to share the irony of this conversation right after we were making jokes, that Ed was able to make Asian jokes because he's Asian, and I can make Jew jokes because I'm Jew. And then we have this conversation afterwards. So room for
But we
improvement.
weren't making generalizations.
I know. I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
But Helmut Marko was not talking about Austrians and Europeans. He's not allowed to make those comments.
No,
if he was from Mexican South America,
then yes,
then he
he's
would be
allowed to.
fucking wide open, bro. Ole, bro. Vamos, let's go. You know what I mean?
All right. So, thank you for all your thoughts. You guys said it perfectly, so I'll leave it there. We're going to end with everyone's favorite game. Name that sponsor. Okay, we're going to name one sponsor. You have to name the team and what the company does. We got a couple of softballs today for you because we're off for a week, just to kind of get you warmed back up. Number one is Peroni.
Me. It's a beer
True.
company, and it is on Aston Martin.
Fuck. On fire. Look at that. Crushed it.
Wow. I don't even have to say nothing after that.
Yeah,
No, I already got the point. Let's go.
I mean,
Next.
the Peroni part was
Next.
easy. I thought the Aston Martin part was going to be a little bit trickier. Number two, Walmart. Yeah, that surprised me too. Walmart.
Walmart. Well, we all know,
We all know what Walmart
is.
is.
It's got to be on Haas. It's an American company, American team. I'm going to say Walmart. You know, they sell
I would say
everything.
McLaren.
Yeah, you would. You would say McLaren. That's like you.
Okay, so we got okay, Thomas.
I'm gonna say Haas.
Haas. Actually, Walmart is where this team's chief advisor gets his Confederate flag. It's on Red Bull.
His Confederate flag.
There we go.
Red Bull, sponsored by Walmart. Didn't see that coming, man.
Mind
Yeah,
blown.
just
Wow.
like a little side pod. There you go, Red Bull.
You can buy
Sorry.
anything at Walmart, even
You can
side
buy-
pods.
There we go, even side pod. There you go. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Lots of fun and great conversation. Thank you for listening. This has been Parc Ferm, the Formula One podcast. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, share with your friends. We'll be back next week to talk about everything Suzuka. And until then, ciao, ciao.
Peace.
To Parc Ferm, the Canadian Formula One podcast. We talk race reviews, news from the paddock, and bring you everything from the world of Formula One. And now your hosts, Drew, Walker, Ed, and Tomas.